back, everyone, to OpenLine, talking about haunted Nashville. So, hearing some scary stories tonight, learning some interesting history about our city. And we have as our guest Mick Woodward. He's with Ghost City Tours. So you're hearing kind of what tourists get to hear, but it's also just interesting to talk about this. We had an interesting call just a moment ago from Ann, who swears there was a house in East Nashville that has been empty for 25 years because it is haunted. And I'm blown away by that. But let's go to our next caller here. Let's go to Dolly. Hello, Dolly.
Hello.
Go right ahead.
My grandmother and grandfather lived on 5th Avenue North in Nashville, and we lived over on 3rd Avenue back in the early 70s.
On Fern Avenue, is that what you said? Fern? What
3rd.
Avenue? Oh, 3rd Avenue, okay.
Yes, 3rd Avenue, that sits right there by that rock yard.
Okay.
Okay, and we lived right there. They called them box houses, the way they were made. But anyway, there was a house on 3rd Avenue, about 5 houses down from where the interstate came in and cut, and a woman was killed there. And they say on the anniversary of her death, you can hear her scream.
Oh. Still
to this day. I live about 3 houses away, and I'm like 7, and it was pretty scary.
Now wait, I'm sorry, you cut out there. You live 3 houses away, and what happened? Did you hear the scream? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we were all outside, and we heard something. And when we heard that, they said that's what that was. It sounded like a big cat, like a lion or a tiger or something, kind of squeal. But the guys and kids that was around, with my older siblings, they said that it was a woman that got killed on that night.
Well, that's horrible.
Her husband killed her because he found her cheating, I guess.
Oh.
And I was listening to y'all, and I know the young man, he said that, Nashville was a really hard town back in the 1800s, and I know for a fact in the 70s it was a hard town. but I enjoyed it. My grandmother, like I said, she lived on 5th Avenue. Right. And she was one of the first houses on 5th Avenue, and my great-grandmother lived down there on,
well, that's okay. That's okay. You don't need to tell me every street. That's fine. But now, all right. Do you have a quick question? Because I'm gonna ask a question. If are you done, or do you want to ask something really fast?
I'm done because I can talk all night.
Well, Dolly, that's fascinating. I love that story. All right. Now, so we just had one caller say this house. Again, I'm blown away by that, sitting empty in East Nashville because it's haunted. It's been empty for 25 years. Blown away by that. Now, this story, that's a creepy story, what she just told. How does that align with other stories, other hauntings that you hear? That's a good story, what Dolly just told.
Oh, yeah. That actually relates to a relatively recent story. I don't get to tell it very often just because the location can be kind of tricky in terms of navigating guests. But on 4th Avenue, do you know the parking lot that's essentially right across the street from the Merchants and actually in the back of the Honky Tonk Central?
Right, yes.
Right. There was a robbery turned murder that had occurred in that parking lot in the 1990s. And it doesn't happen on an anniversary per se, but it happens around the time that the killing had originally occurred, which is close to 2 or 3 in the morning. And people will report on even on a completely quiet night downtown, which is a very rare thing, they'll hear a woman just shouting, or what even sounds like a sort of echoing gunshot coming from that parking lot. So it kind of aligns with other stories like Dolly's just there.
Wow. Yeah, that's a creepy story. That's very creepy. That's very interesting. And now you've done this for a while. You've actually looked at what other cities are doing. How much do you believe this?
So I like to tell my guests I was kind of cursed to do this because I actually experienced a ghostly thing when I was 7 years old. And ever since then, I've kind of had just like, okay, it's a passing interest in it. But then it kind of got reinvigorated in the past few years with me when I went on a ghost tour overseas. And I got really much more interested in presenting not only just the ghost stories, but also the history of just things in general. So I'm a strong like believer in these events that occur. I will obviously pull out my skeptic card on some of them because some of them can be very, very far-fetched. So they can be. So,
Right.
But I think the more subtle stories are actually the ones that are more believable, because if you just say that somebody, was shot in a hotel room and there's constantly blood on a window somewhere, I'm like, okay, somebody's going to pick up on that and, think that's not exactly the case, because you can just come by and confirm that whenever you want and it's not going to really be there. But the more intricate or the more historically backed stories, I'm very big on thinking those are real.
All right, what are some other places? So I've got a list here, a quick list of the top 10 haunted places in Nashville.
All right.
And I don't know if they're in order, but number one on this list is the Tennessee State Prison. That seems like it would be pretty haunted.
That is very haunted. There's not much like I can say really about it, just because it is a big sort of condemned building. Not many people get the chance to go in there. I know they've been on the Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, ghost shows and go into these places and try and confirm all of this stuff. But I do know from sort of like secondhand knowledge that when they filmed The Green Mile at that prison, they experienced some significant production issues, apparently from all of these paranormal entities hanging around there.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And why do they? All right, do you have? I mean, I don't know who to ask these questions to, so I'm going to ask them to you.
Yeah.
I mean, why do they hang around? So why are they there in your opinion?
So I really couldn't tell you. Some of them, might just refuse to leave just because they have dedicated themselves to the place. I don't know if it's on your list, but the Southern Turf building that has skulls in the backside of it, right around Printer's Alley, the owner of the bar, of the Southern Turf bar back in the 1800s, or in early 1900s, was actually refusing to leave, even though the city tried to evict him from the apartment that he had in there. So he might have just extended that "I refuse to leave" well beyond his expiration date, right? For a prison, I don't think many people are looking to refuse to leave a prison, right? So part of it could just be they suffered some significant trauma in that prison, which I think makes a bit more sense. And when you have this traumatic event, it tends to create a lot of just swelling emotions that people will say will linger. When people, talk about bad vibes from others or other just, I struggle to throw this word in there, but the sort of psychic connections to these places, that's kind of what they're talking about. There's just, you can feel energy from people's emotions. Like even if you're just one-on-one, somebody's mad and they're walking up to you, you can almost like, even just not reading their body language, something tells you something's off here. So
yeah, that's
and
right.
I think
that's
that kind of lingers in some of these places, and especially when you have trauma, that builds up those feelings that just decide to hang around.
I understand we need a break. I want to ask you another thing here. What about the and call in? I encourage people to call in with their questions. Dolly and Ann had very interesting questions. The Union Station Hotel, that's on this list.
Yes.
Why is that on the list?
So I'm sketchy on the timeline of it because I haven't told this story too much, but I believe it was the 19-teens. One of the biggest train derailments occurred right in Nashville with, I think it was a cargo train and a passenger train that had essentially derailed each other. And it not only killed, I think, over 100 people instantly, but the people who had survived and just were very badly injured wound up being taken into the Union Station themselves as a sort of makeshift field hospital.
Oh, wow.
And when you have the more severe injuries, you wound up having a lot of people who had died in there. And what also is connected to there, the Flying Saucer restaurant, I believe, or Flying Saucer bar, whichever one it is, was actually the baggage claim connected to the Union Station, but that was converted into the sort of makeshift morgue because they kept bringing in people, and they just had more bodies piling up. They're like, we need to put them somewhere because we need to keep the next flow of people coming in. So that is a big part of why it has had those reports tied to it.
That train derailment, yeah, that's a big deal in our history. And Ann mentioned it in that house. May have impacted that house somehow. Yeah, that was a terrible, I think the worst in history still, train derailment. Yeah, and Union Station doesn't talk about that too much. That's very interesting. All right, well, all right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. There's a number if you want to call, 737+, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.